Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. Are you planning to travel with your group sometime soon? If so, please consider my sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, a full-service tour company specializing in student group travel. With a former educator as its CEO, Kaleidoscope Adventures is dedicated to changing student lives through travel, and they offer high-quality service and an attention to detail that comes from more than 25 years of student travel experience. Trust Kaleidoscope's outstanding staff to focus on your group's one-of-a-kind adventure so that you can focus on everything else. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jake Walker and Colin Peters for their contributions to the show, and especially to all of you who are listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. All right, everyone, welcome to the Everything Band podcast. My name is Mark Connor. As you know, I'm the host, but tonight the tables are going to be turned because I have with me Colin Peters, who has been helping with the podcast for the past year. Colin generally does my communication, outreach to guests, that sort of thing, the things that make me uncomfortable as a podcast host, Colin does. And so what we've decided to do is not because we lack guests, but because the pandemic has been really interesting for me. And you've probably noticed that I haven't released a lot of episodes. And that's because I haven't really been feeling particularly good about my career and what I've been doing. And I thought it might be useful if I actually was the subject of the interview, and maybe if I can bring some of this to some of you who might be feeling the same way. So tonight, our next guest is me. So Colin, would you like to begin?
So, Mark, I think it would be really neat for you to give us your origin story and kind of talk us through, where you've been, what you've done that's led up to this point in your life and career.
I've heard this answer 190 plus times, so I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version of my story. I started playing the trumpet when I was in the summer between my third and fourth grade. I was 9. I didn't really want to play the trumpet, but my best friend wanted to play it. I've said this on the show a million times. I think I would have been a better trombone player, but my buddy and I wanted to play the trumpet together, so we did, and I had sort of a rocky start to it. I played 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, but then I moved, a family move, and I started 7th grade, and I was in a new school, and it was a much bigger school than the one I had left, and we had a playing test, and I actually lost my chair, and being 12, I didn't really know how to handle it, and I actually quit band for my 7th grade year, and so I didn't really play much in middle school. It wasn't until high school that I picked the trumpet back up, and so I'm just definitely kind of different than a lot of my guests who kind of knew from early ages that they wanted to be in music. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I thought I was going to be a history teacher because that's what my father did, and he was my hero. And it wasn't until I moved to California in high school that I had a band director who really inspired me with his programming and his teaching. And that's what led to me auditioning on trumpet to be a music education major at California State University, Chico. Started my music ed career. I really loved marching band in high school, but I did not like it in college. Had to do it for 2 years as an ed major, and then I stopped. So I have kind of a love-hate relationship with marching band. Kind of love it as an activity, but don't really want to be involved in it as a teacher. I know a lot of my listeners are aghast with horror at that thought, but that's me. So let's see. As my undergraduate was a music ed major, started to compose in theory class, started to kind of take the assignments and do extra and write little tunes, especially like the counterpoint. I love counterpoint. It's really, I think, what marks me as a composer more than anything. And during my sophomore year of college, our band director, music ed professor, was diagnosed with cancer and ended up passing away. And it really kind of threw me off. I was struggling with the trumpet at the time. I remember I should have been a trombone player. Excuses. And when he passed away, I just was struggling with my teacher, and I actually dropped the music ed degree. And I remember him meeting with the music ed professor in his office, and I remember him telling me, and I remember telling him that I wanted to compose, but I wasn't sure if I could do it. And I remember him telling me to shoot for the stars because, that's what you do. And so I did. I switched my major away from music ed, and I actually got a degree in general music because there wasn't a composition option. But with the general music, I was able to take multiple electives in composition, and I studied composition with a department chair who was a composer. I studied orchestration with a theory teacher who was a composer, and I really kind of dove in to build up a portfolio to apply for a master's degree in composition. So I applied to a bunch of places, got into the University of Colorado, which was one of my first choices, and decided to go off to Boulder, where I studied composition and theory, and studied with Dr. Richard Tenzing, and really enjoyed my time there. I was actually classmates with Kristen Custer, who's the composition professor at the University of Michigan, among a few other notable people, and had a great time. But I was racking up debts, and I was home for the holidays in my final year of my master's degree at Boulder. This was an MM in music theory. And my father told me that the principal at his school, he taught at an all-boys Catholic private school, grades 7 through 12, that the principal wanted to meet me and talk about, because they wanted to restart the band program there, and he wanted to talk to me. I didn't realize this was going to be a job interview. I probably went in shorts and a t-shirt because that's what you do when you're 22 or 23, right? Maybe I was a little older than that, 25, 26. So I showed up, and he and I talked for like an hour and a half. I told him what I thought about a program, how I would start it. One of the things that I think I'm good at is kind of seeing big picture. I'm a good organizer. And so I kind of laid out my vision for what the band would look like at this school. And then at the end of the interview, I didn't know it was an interview, remember, he offered me a job, and I was kind of a little bit surprised. And I told him I'd think about it, and then I ended up taking it. And so the next year, without a music ed degree, with only 2 years of music ed training, I dove into this job at this Catholic high school. And so the first day I had 12 students, and like 6 of them were saxophone players. This was 1997. That first day of band camp was a little rough, and I had a lot of learning to do in just a few short hours. But one of the first things I did was reach out to the all-girls school across the street. Now, the schools weren't really compatible necessarily. They shared like cheerleaders and football and all that stuff there, and they did dances together. But the girls' school was a diocesan school. My school was not. It was through the Christian Brothers out of Chicago. And so it was a little bit of an uneasy partnership, but I was able to get the girls to come over and participate in the band program. So I went from that first day with 12 boys with, saxophones, trumpets, and percussion. The next day I had, 9 more girls. I had a band of 21, and I had flutes and clarinets and all the other instruments that I needed. And so off we went, and I think I ended up with 25 at the end of that year. And I think, it was pretty rough. It was 7 through 12, and I had kids of all ages and abilities. And I think we played Akey's 3 Years from Gloucester at Festival at the end of that year. And, the band just kept on growing. I was fortunate to have some talented kids come through. I had a student my first year who was a junior who ended up going to the Berklee School of Music. Excellent jazz saxophone player, and I used him. We would do like Louie in the stands, and he would just like improvise over the top of the band. I mean, I just used what I had to kind of make us sound good. And by the end of my 4th year there, I had 85 kids. I had grown from a concert band of 25 to a concert band, a high school concert band, a junior high concert band, a jazz ensemble, and 2 guitar classes. So I started out teaching 1 band and 4 Englishes, and I ended up teaching all music at the end. And so I was really proud of that. And but at this point, I had always dreamt of going off to get a doctorate in composition. And as much as I love teaching high school kids and junior high kids, I really had this dream of being a college professor. And so I went off and I got my doctorate, or I applied for my doctorate at Florida State University in composition, and a few other schools. I was accepted at 2, Florida State and another school in the Northeast I won't mention, simply because I didn't go there. And I entered the composition studio at Florida State. And my first thing I did there was I was given a fellowship to write a piece for Tim Paul, who's now a college music professor. He was the conductor of the Leon High School band. And he began the warm-up every day with Chesnikov, Salvation is Created. And he wanted to do a variations on Salvation is Created. And so that became my first published piece, which is variations on a Russian hymn. So that was great, except my composition professor, who was a wonderful man and a wonderful composer, quite well known. But he was a modernist, and he was a European modernist, and he didn't necessarily like band, especially tonal, modal, diatonic band music. And so I kind of went away from that and began writing more, modernist, typical academic music. And that's fine, but it never really spoke to me that much. But I did it and I was fine. But that piece, Variations of Russian Hymn, sat in a drawer for a long time before I finally pulled it out and sent it to a publisher.
So I have a quick question about the all-boys school. You mentioned how you started with a band of 12 and just how it developed and evolved over the years. So were you able to keep the participation with the all-girls school after that first year?
Yes, I was able to, and I was able to successfully navigate the 2 administrations, even when the inevitable things happened. When you mix kids of that age, I was able to kind of work my way through the thorny issues that would come up with the mixed genders. But yeah, that was a great relationship. And, I have to look back, and I had a really terrific feeder teacher who was at the Catholic elementary schools. And he did a great job starting 4th graders out. And, I don't know if I could have done that gig as well if it weren't for him, at least at that time, because I didn't really have the skills I needed. I mean, I suppose I would have learned them, but that certainly helped a great deal. And that feeder teacher, I owe him a lot for my career. So
I also find it interesting. You're one of the only trumpet players I know that doesn't live and breathe for marching band.
Now, listen, I loved marching band in high school because it was a social activity. And I think marching band's terrific as an activity and as a way to bring your band together and build band culture. But musically, I was always looking beyond that. And so I struggled with that a little bit. But believe me, I enjoyed playing the high notes. I enjoyed playing the solos on the football field. I mean, I'm still a trumpet player, That's still in me. Yeah. So, I was thinking about the end of my story here. So when I went and got my doctorate, my goal was to be a college professor, but I didn't really get involved with the band program as much as I should have. One of my big regrets is that I was at Florida State, one of the finest music ed schools in the country. Patrick Dunnigan and, all the marching chiefs in the band program and all the folks that are there. And I didn't really kind of be involved in that world. Now, part of this is circumstance. I met my wife my first year, and she's a cellist. So I wrote a string quartet. I was involved in string chamber music, because those were her friends and those became my friends. And I kind of moved away from the band. I was more involved in the orchestra. And it's one of my big regrets about my time there. I really should have, but you can't read the future. Hindsight is 20/20. So I got to not beat myself up about that.
So did your relationship with your wife and meeting those orchestral musicians lead to you composing more or less orchestral music at all?
No, not really. My dissertation was on orchestra work. I wrote a string quartet while I was there. One of my better works, one of the pieces I really, really liked from that time is an elegy I wrote for my first composition teacher. That was viola, clarinet, and flute. So I wrote some string music, but I wouldn't call myself a string composer. I wrote a vocal piece. I'm not exactly prolific, as my publisher will tell you. I don't send a lot of music over. I try, I kind of dip my toes in like lots of different things, and I'm a teacher and a podcaster and a composer, and then I do this and then I do that, and so I'm not someone who sits down and writes every day for 4 or 5 hours, so yeah. And so then after I graduated from Florida State, my wife got her doctorate in cello performance a year later. I actually taught for a year at Florida A&M while she was finishing up. And I also taught the grad theory review at Florida State. So I was teaching graduate students at Florida State. I was teaching class piano at Florida A&M, which was terrific. I loved that gig. And one of my students in my class piano class was Chandler Wilson, who is now the third director at Florida State, third band director. And so, yeah, I mean, that was Florida A&M, and the HBCU experience was really great for me. It gave me a chance to kind of see a different part of the music world and a different outlook on it, and I really cherished that time. And then when my wife graduated, we were both looking for gigs. I got a 2-year visiting assistant professor job teaching theory at Western Carolina. This was the time when Bob Buckner was still there, and that was a great job. But Cullowhee, North Carolina, as beautiful as it is up there in the Appalachian Mountains, it wasn't really a great place for a cellist. And at the same time, or like really late in the process, so I think I got my gig in May. And then really late in the process, like the end of June, my wife got a 1-year visiting assistant professor job to teach cello at Southern Illinois Edwardsville here in the St. Louis area. So we made a really fateful decision that she would teach her 1 year and I would teach my job, and we would be together in North Carolina on the holidays, and we would meet every other weekend in Nashville. And so that's what we did. We kind of like met every other weekend in Nashville. We spent the holidays together, but it was a tough year for both of us to be apart. We'd only been married a couple of years. And then at the end of the year, her job went tenure track. She won the tenure track position, and I left the job at Western Carolina, which was really bitter for me. I really wanted to be a full-time college professor, tenure track, and but this was right for our family. We wanted to have children. St. Louis was certainly a more fertile market for her, and of course the medical care is top-notch in St. Louis, and so we just made the decision, not that it's not North Carolina, but Illinois. There's a lot of factors that play into this, as everyone who's listening can probably imagine. So I moved to Edwardsville, and this was 2006, and we've been here ever since. I guess it's been 15 years. We've been here. I taught music theory at Maryville University, Theory 1 and 2, and then at McKendree University I taught Theory 1 through 4, and I taught Oral Skills 1 through 4, and I taught some composers. I ran the small chamber ensembles at Maryville University, and for 1 year in 2017-18, I had a 1-year visiting position at Webster University in St. Louis. I was filling in for someone who retired late, but they decided that they wanted to hire a jazz line, and I can do many things, and I've taught many things in my career, but jazz is definitely not one of them, at least not in that capacity. And so I had to move on from that job, but I didn't want to go back to being an adjunct music theory professor, because by this point I had started the podcast, I was writing band music, and I really missed being a band director. I just kind of like felt that I was missing a part of my identity that I really wanted to explore a little bit more. And so I didn't take my theory jobs back, and I just kept an online music appreciation I teach. And I took a job at the Saul Mirowitz Jewish Community School here in St. Louis, and I've been teaching 4th through 8th grade band ever since. Well, I taught 4th and 8th grade band for a year and a half, and then I've been teaching whatever I can ever since. I'm really grateful that even during the pandemic without band at my school, that they've kept me on the payroll as a part-timer. I mean, I think that says a lot about them and the administration there. So here I am in this job, and there's a lot to talk about as what's been going on in the last couple of years. So, but I'll let you run the interview since it's not my show, at least today.
So let's do this. Let's transition away from your compositions for a second, and I want you to talk to us about what you've been doing in St. Louis, what your teaching has looked like, and especially the last year and a half, 2 years with everything going on with the COVID pandemic. I was hoping you could talk to us about what your teaching looked like pre-COVID and what your teaching situation in school, district, and community is looking like now in a post-quarantine but still pandemic situation.
Yeah, so when I took the job, there was a band at the school. The school, now let me tell you, it's a Jewish day school. There's not a lot of students. It's only about 135 to 150 students, and the middle school only has about 40, 35 students. So it's not a big school. And so when I first started, fourth grade band was compulsory. So the kids came to me twice a week. Well, once a week they came for a 45-minute sectional with the whole band, with their whole classroom. So like there were 2 fourth grade classes. So one teacher would bring, at 10 a.m., the other one would bring them at 11. And so I would have the full classes. And then the other day I would get them in pullouts by instrument groups. And so I would take, like the clarinets and the flutes, or the clarinets and the saxophones, depending on how I mixed it up that day. And the teachers were pretty flexible with me. I could change the pullouts at any time. And, I was kind of like experimenting, because as we all know, when you're dealing with heterogeneous groups, you're dealing with, transpositions, you're dealing with different techniques. And it was my first year back teaching fourth graders, and I needed to make sure that my classroom management was on point. And so I couldn't sort of like stop and explain things, and, all those things that go into being a fourth grade teacher that I had never done before, because graduate students don't talk to each other when you're talking as a teacher. So I had fourth grade compulsory, then I had fifth grade band, and I actually had something like 8 out of 11 or 12 kids. I had a pretty good group, and they ended up being the core of my band moving forward. Just really a nice group of kids, and they're 8th graders now. And then I had a middle school band, and I had 6 kids in the middle school band. I had 7. I had an 8th grader who transferred in, but he came from a big public school. And so he was way ahead of everyone else, because he had band 5 days a week, the traditional model. And so he was playing at an 8th grade public school band program level, whereas the middle schoolers were playing at 3rd year with 2 lessons a day. So where we're about here, if anyone who's listening. And so he left after a semester, but I have to say he was really helpful that first semester, and I really kind of used him as a model for the other kids, and I think that really helped. And I was sad to lose him, but I also understood that he was frustrated. So I want the kids to be happy. One bit of advice I learned a long time ago is if a student wants to leave the band, you don't ever want to beg them, because you give them the power. You ask them, you give them the option to come back, and you tell them that your door is always open, but you don't beg them. So that's my 2 cents for that topic. So and so the program was small that first year. I had our first concert, and it was a little bit rocky, but we did a Hanukkah concert, and I don't want to ever say anything about another band director, because the previous director is a wonderful guy, and he's well known in the St. Louis area, and probably some listeners, and I love him dearly. But he was older, grandfatherly, and whereas I'm coming in like I want to just do something here, and so I was very energetic, and I think that there was a response to that from the school community that first concert. But I thought it was terrible. Right? Because I have this bar that's really high, and the parents are like, "Oh, that was great." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness. Okay. So I have a lot of flexibility and a leeway here in this gig." And so then we had a really lovely spring concert, and things were starting to go. And then the second year, the program was really starting to blossom. I mean, I could see the kids really growing, especially the middle school kids. I mean, we did fire dance. I mean, these were kids that were barely playing, grade 0.5 and grade 1 the first year. Now we're doing fire dance the second year, and I was excited. Things were really going well, and then in March it came to a screeching halt, and the kids checked out, I checked out. It was really hard to keep it going. We weren't sure how to do it, as everyone was. I was sort of feeling it out, but I was only seeing the kids twice a week, and the school didn't really set up a time for band. They were, we had to do their online times with English and math, and, you can all know the story. And so it really sort of was rough. And then we thought we were okay. That first summer, everyone was optimistic. And so we decided to have band, with masks and instruments. But I have a very small room, and, we started okay, and we were doing some good music with the middle schoolers. The 5th graders were way behind because they lost the final part of their year. And I lost a lot of those kids because they didn't have their final concert. And for anyone who wonders why we have concerts, it is a summative assessment, but it's also a rallying point for the students, because the high coming off the concert keeps kids in your program. Just offering that little tidbit. And so I lost a bunch of kids in the 4th grade because I didn't get that concert. They didn't see the flowering of their efforts. And but then about a month into into the year, the Delta variant, as we all know, started to come in, and it got really uncomfortable in the small room, and it got really uncomfortable with me. I was not feeling safe, and the parents weren't necessarily feeling safe, and the kids weren't feeling safe. And so we pulled the plug on band, and the principal was okay, or the head of school was okay with that. And I tried to do bucket drumming for about a month, and then I realized that buckets in that small room, that wasn't going to work. And so then I went to Soundtrap, and I've been doing digital music ever since with the kids. And so I give them projects, and they do digital music stuff and create songs, and they've scored videos and done all kinds of cool stuff that I think is awesome and that we should build into school curricula. And I will talk about that later. But I haven't been a band teacher, and at first it was okay. You know, it was like, all right, well, I could get through this. But, you know, lately it's been pretty rough on me. And the good news is that unless something really crazy happens, I am restarting the band program in January. Lots of complications. I won't start fourth graders because they've had a teacher left in the beginning of the year, and it's been a rough year for them, and the head of school wants them to have more time to get to know their new teachers. So I understand that. So I'll have them a little bit later, but I'll start with the fifth grade in the middle school, and we're all going back to square one. Those eighth graders who were doing so well haven't played an instrument in almost 2 years. And so, you know, I think we're just going to go back to page one and see where we're at and just try to build up from there.
I don't want to harp on any of the negative aspects on this so much, because it is very exciting that, you know, band is going to come back into your community and school. Quick question. When you were doing the digital music with your students, was that in person, or were you just seeing your students virtually?
No, I was face to face, but we went down to once a week because I was going into the classrooms because the band room doesn't have desks, and I don't have a smart board. And so it was easier for me to go into their classroom, have them use their laptops that the school provides, you know, at their desks. So I was seeing them face to face, but it was only once a week, which is a drag.
So I'm sure a lot of us can relate to being on the educator side of all of this, but then having to, you know, be someone who helps in making the decision of, well, do we need to cut the music program temporarily? So was this a decision that was made just with you? Was this a decision that was made in conjunction with your administration? Kind of talk us through what that process looked like for you and your administration in your school.
Well, it's interesting because at the time, you know, it came about after discussions with the head of school. I mean, I was in her office every week, like, okay, so I'm not feeling comfortable, and she was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm feeling comfortable. And, you know, it became a little bit driven by fear and maybe paranoia. I don't know. At the time, it certainly seemed like the right decision, and it certainly was met with approval by the school community in general. Like, the parents were behind me. And so I think I made the right decision. And so at the time, it was more of a relief than disappointment, if that makes sense, because there was fear. You know, this was before the vaccine, and, you know, no one wanted to get sick. Certainly, I didn't want to make anyone else sick in my band class. That would have been terrible. So, you know, but what happens is what was relief. And then, you know, for the rest of that year, I was okay with Soundtrap. I did the best I could with it. You know, I'm not an electronic music whiz, but I understand how it works, and I taught the kids, and I certainly can compose. And it was fun. It was interesting. But, you know, slowly but surely, I found myself kind of spiraling with my mental health because of this. And it's just only in this fall. And I think, you know, Jake and I, Jake also helps with the podcast. We talked about this, I don't know, about a month ago, Colin? And I haven't been releasing episodes, and we've only released like 6 episodes this year because honestly, I feel completely disconnected from the band world. I feel completely disconnected from my profession. Remember, I left college teaching to be a band director, and then that gets taken away. And so this has been really, I mean, I don't want to complain. I mean, everyone who listens to me, they don't want to hear that. But this has been tough on me. It's been tough on my mental health. And I've sort of come to some revelations about my mental health in the past year that I didn't know after seeking help. And you know, it's better now, but I'm still like, until band starts, I'm still kind of in this like wait and see. And I'm really hoping Midwest in 2 weeks kind of kickstarts everything, or I guess it's a week now. And that's what I'm counting on. It's like seeing everybody, even with the mask, is going to be like, okay, yeah, I want to go be a band director again. You know what I mean? It's going to get my excitement level up to where it needs to be. Because honestly, I'm still kind of in this weird place mentally with the whole thing.
And, I know we talked about this about a month or so ago when we came up with this idea to release an episode like this. And, some of us are in realities right now where band is happening and things are just moving at different, speeds than what's happening with you right now. And so I'm sure just seeing, at the rate things are changing in different places is definitely, lending a hand to where you are kind of mentally and with everything going on your side.
It's certainly been tough. But again, I don't want to complain. Band's going to come back. We're doing podcast episodes. We're getting this thing back on track. I'm writing music again. So slowly but surely it's coming together. I want to make sure I'm clear about my school. There a lot of the schools, we might be one of the few schools in St. Louis that isn't doing band right now. But, we have very small facilities. I teach very young students who couldn't be vaccinated up until just recently. And, we have a lot of our parents are, doctors, and we have a medical board, and we have a parent who's a pediatric epidemiologist at Washington University. So, they're very cautious about things. And I appreciate that because they're really trying to be safe with their recommendations to the school about what we can and can't do. It's not that I haven't wanted to have band, but yet I respect expertise and I respect these doctors. And so I just want to say that, I don't want to complain about them because I think they've put the students' best interests first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Tatum, and I'm the host of Ictus, the Evolving Conductor, a proud member of the Muted Podcast Network. Ictus is your source for any and everything conducting, listening, teaching, and music making. Treat yourself to a dose of musical inspiration as we pick the minds of great conductors and delve into noteworthy repertoire. If you're a musician, teacher, or conductor, you found your people. New episodes are released on Thursdays, and you can find Ictus anywhere you listen to podcasts or ictuspodcast.com. That's IC2US podcast.com.
So a positive that I was just thinking about in relation to your digital music experience with your students and, related to your composition background, was this kind of rejuvenating in a way to, even though you weren't having band and we weren't playing instruments in your classroom, was it rejuvenating at all, to work on some compositional aspects with your students that maybe you wouldn't have gotten to in a normal band classroom setting?
Yeah, it certainly was. It was what I knew best. I mean, bucket drumming, I'm not going to sit here and say that I was a great bucket drumming teacher. This was certainly more natural and a better fit for my skill set. And yeah, it was a little bit rejuvenating. And I've actually started an elective in middle school that's digital music, and I've got like 20 kids signed up for it. So it led to that, which is good. And one of my big things is creativity. I believe in the large ensemble. I believe in band, but I also believe that we need to do our best to offer more vernacular creativity opportunities for these kids who might not be interested in the large ensemble model.
So, Mark, can you expand on your inclusion ideas in relation to, vernacular and students outside of our traditional music classroom? Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, this is my answer to the problems facing band, and I have something else to talk about there too. But one of the things I really, really am kind of hot for right now is the idea that we're only reaching about 20% of students through our traditional large ensembles. That's choir, band, and orchestra. And this is what the research has told us. And I really want to reach more kids through music. I find it interesting that we have general music through 6th grade, 7th grade, but then we don't have general music. We have choir, band, and orchestra. And this is when we lose most of our kids as far as making music in school. Now, we have a lot of talented kids who aren't in our ensembles that are playing guitar, they're in rock bands, they're singing on their own. They're doing YouTube videos, whatever it is that they're pursuing. And I really want us to embrace the idea of offering digital music, modern band, vernacular styles for these kids. Now, here's the problem, and we all know this is the problem. Band directors are extremely busy. Choir directors, orchestra directors are extremely busy. We're often full schedules. We don't have time to do this, nor do we have expertise. So what's the solution? Well, the obvious solution is that we have another music professional in the school who can teach this, but then we run into salary and facilities and equipment. And so it always comes back to money in the end, doesn't it? But what I'd like to see, if I could have my perfect world, and I want to try to advocate for this as much as possible, is that we preserve the large ensemble model, but we supplement it with more vernacular styles, because I think we're missing a big chunk of the kids. And I think what we can do is we can kind of invite kids across the street, like, oh, wait a minute, that band director is actually pretty cool. Look, he's teaching this. Now, again, that might not be your cup of tea if you're listening, and you might be grumbling at me, but it doesn't mean you have to do it. But I think it's a conversation that I think we need to have more frequently in our large ensemble circles. And that includes choral music, and that includes orchestral music.
I think we all need to remember that, music is a universal language, and, our experiences that have brought some of us to this point have just really shaped us. And, every single person interacts with music in some way every day. And, for those of us that are in the music education positions that we are, sometimes our experiences brought us here based off of a piece, maybe a very motivating individual that was an educator, or some other reason. And so, I think that any opportunity that we have to share music with every single person in and outside of our classroom is a very important idea.
Yeah, because there are kids who are interested in music, but they're not interested in playing trumpet. And that's okay, right? That's okay. So I just feel like, we're music teachers first, we're band directors second. But that's hard because, if you're a competitive marching band director, you don't have time for this. I get it completely. So, I mean, the solution obviously is that we need to kind of find a new paradigm for the way we teach music and the kind of positions that we have in schools. But I mean, this is like a cliff that I don't know how to ascend at the moment.
So, Mark, are there any more specifics that you want to talk about that maybe I did not ask about in regards to just how this journey has been, especially over the last, year and a half, 2 years?
No, I don't think so. I think the overriding story of my career is that I've just been really flexible along the way. That doesn't mean I haven't been disappointed. I mean, I always wanted to be a full-time college professor, and that was disappointing. And I'm not sure I should have left my band position in California because I look back and, that was a good gig. But along the way, I've done so many cool things. I mean, I've met so many amazing people, and I've written music that's been published, and I've had bands win awards, and I've had hundreds of students go on careers in music, as music majors. And I don't know, it's just been a really rewarding career, but it certainly hasn't been anything that I expected, and it certainly hasn't gone according to any model that, anyone could have predicted.
So I'm definitely not going to ask if you have any regrets, but do you have any, future thoughts or ideas on what your educational path might look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like to keep composing, and I'd like to try to give myself a little more energy to that, because I haven't written a really big piece in a while, really since graduate school. And I'd like to really kind of dig a little deeper than what I've been doing. I really enjoy writing beginning band music, young band music. I seem to have a knack for it, but I really want to kind of write something symphonic. So that's something that's on my plate. I don't know when that's going to happen. Fortunately, I've had plenty of guests on this show who I feel like it could ask for help with that. And as a teacher, I want to build this band program up. I want to see if I can't make this band program here at the school stronger. And I've certainly accomplished a lot already. I've got the facilities better. I've got a real band room now with shelves and, all the things that you would expect. So that's been good, but I want to see some progress with the students, and I want to leave it in a better place than I got it. And I don't know what's going to go from there. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a job that comes up that's like teaching theory and conducting a band at a community college. Or maybe someone needs a, assistant band director who's experienced but doesn't need to be the face of the program. I don't know. When I think about what could be, there's so many options because I've put myself in a position to do really a lot of different things. And I don't think I want to go back to being a theory teacher necessarily, nor do I want to be the head high school band director again. Those are things that I've done, but they're in my past now.
So in regards to the podcast, do you have any thoughts that you want to share on the direction this is going or the future of the podcast? Jake and I were really excited to kind of join your team and be a part of this. And so is there anything for the listeners that they might want to know about this going forward?
Well, I think the plan is to try to get my energy back for the project. Like I said, the pandemic really took the wind out of my sails, and the less I taught band, the less interested I was in doing a podcast about band, if that makes sense, because it was easier just to avoid it than it was to confront it. And so, I'd like to kind of get back on, in the saddle here and get a bunch of interviews done. We're coming up on episode 200. We're going to be releasing this conversation. I've got a conversation with Virginia Allen that I'm editing right now. And I think we have a guest coming up that people will be excited about, if I'm correct. And, release a couple episodes before the end of the year and then get back to a more regular schedule, either weekly or bi-weekly, depending on how we do. And honestly, I would like to involve you and Jake more in the production aspects of this. You guys have been great kind of getting the ship righted and helping me get organized after being a hot mess for so many years. And I think maybe now you guys can do more of this stuff, run interviews and do some editing and get involved in that end. Because I think that'll help too. It'll help keep me energized by kind of helping you guys. It's that teacher thing in me.
Hey there. My name is Dr. Garrett Hope. I am a composer, coach, podcaster, and speaker. I've been focused on building my music business since 2014 and helping others build theirs since 2015. I want to tell you about the second annual Ultimate Music Business Summit we are organizing. It'll take place early January of 2022. There will be dozens of presentations with highly actionable content, all of it available to you so you can start your business, grow your business, and ultimately make more money. Because here's the deal. Unless you earn all of your income from an employer, you are a self-employed small business owner. And if you want to do more than survive, if you want to grow your audience, or if you want to impact more people, you have to think and act like a business owner. And that means this summit is for you. This summit will give you real-world, not theoretical, strategies you can implement immediately. You don't need to be stuck with fear or living in your failures. I promise you, with all the teachers lined up, you will get something you've never thought of before. Even though building a business is hard, no one is promising it's easy. It is possible. You just need the right tools and strategies. Tickets for this virtual event will go on sale soon. To be the first in line and to get more information about the summit, presenters, and more, go to musicsummit.biz. That's musicsummit.biz and add your email to the list.
So one of the great things about having you as a guest on the show, which I think everyone will enjoy a lot, is we get to ask you these kind of rapid fire questions that you ask at the end of every interview.
Well, it's the enlightened round because they're hardly rapid fire. Not lightning, enlightened.
So let's dive in. I love this first question and a lot of our guests' responses to it. So where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Oh man, I've asked this. I think I started these questions in around episode 20. And so, I think I've asked this question 170 times. And it's really funny. I think some teachers and some professionals have the ability to straddle this line better than others. Like, for example, Greg Bim at Marian Catholic has one of the most successful high school band programs competitively in competitive marching band in the country. But yet Greg is so good and so disarming his personality doesn't sort of lead to this sort of big ego. And I think that's reflected in his students. And I think he teaches them the right lessons. It's really hard to say because I think it's a really personal choice. Now, listen, when I was a 7th grader, it was competition that drove me out of band, right? It was that chair test. And I didn't understand what was happening because the teacher, I don't think she handled it in the right way. And I don't remember her. I can't even remember her face or her name, but I remember feeling like a failure and wanting to quit band. And so I think we have to be very careful about how we use competition. I don't believe in competition for young kids. I don't think it's healthy. However, the kids are competitive. And so you don't want to squash that either. So, it's a fine line as far as younger kids. Now in high school, I think competition is fine for kids. They really like competitive marching band. They like to see what kind of score they can get at festival. But I want that to be about the score they get against themselves. So in other words, we got an 89 and a 2 last year. Can we get a 90 and a 1 this year? Do you know what I mean? So we're competing against ourselves. I don't want to line up with other bands and say, oh, we're first, we're second, we're third. I don't necessarily like that. But, yet the kids have fun with that. But I remember being at my first year teaching and being at a Music in the Parks festival. And I think, we got our trophy. And I remember a senior kid who was only in the band for a year being so excited and I thought he crossed the line of what's tasteful as far as competition, and I didn't like that. And so I think it's a really hard question to answer, and I think the number of answers I get from my guests kind of reflects that, because everyone's got a different answer to it. But I will say, in the end, the most common thing, and I agree with it, is it's about the music first. If competition helps you be a better music teacher, helps the kids learn better, then it's valuable. But beyond that, if it's just for the sake of winning, that's not healthy.
Oh yeah. So when I was a first year teacher, I had a mentor teacher. And she gave me some really, really good advice, which was, to be a sponge and to just soak up as much as I could, just being in a room and listening to people who are older, who have more experience. And that experience could be good and bad, and just to soak up every bit of information that I could.
I agree.
So, your work-life balance story with your wife, when she was in St. Louis and you were in North Carolina, and, you guys were having to travel every other weekend to see each other. I think that's an amazing example of work-life balance when the situation is just the way it is. So, now that your wife has settled a little bit, how do you achieve a work-life balance in your current situation?
Well, this is an interesting question because in October, our principal sent out a plea. If you know anyone who can, sub for ELA, we have a paternity leave coming up. Well, my first gig, I taught English in addition to band. So I volunteered to do this ELA, and it was only for 20 days because it was in November. So we had standardized testing, we had Thanksgiving. There were all these days that I didn't have to be there. But I took it. I said, okay, I'll do this. But I realized 4 days into it that I don't have the infrastructure in my life set up to be full time anymore, because I've become full time through gig work, composing, podcasting, teaching online, teaching the band, which I was still doing while I was doing the ELA. I've just set my life up so that I've got time at home to be, pick the kids up at school, to help my wife get them on the bus, and then go do my thing. And I realized in this gig how important that stuff is to me. And so I think if I were to go back to full-time teaching, really full-time teaching, I would have to kind of give some things up. And that's hard because I love the things that I do. I like the variety in my life. And, so what I would say is, I think the point of this is that when I was young and my wife and I were, driving back and forth every weekend, we didn't have kids. We were thinking about starting a family. We were basically in our second year of marriage. When I was a high school band director, I was tireless with that job. I spent, the joke, first car in, last car out. That was me. I mean, I had my jazz ensemble met at 7 a.m. Me and the principal. That's who was at school. And not even the secretary was there. And, then I would coach basketball. So I'd be doing games until 9 p.m. And but I was in my 20s, I had that energy and it felt right. That was my identity. But I I didn't have a girlfriend. I was just doing my thing. I was just happy doing that. I say all this because that was right for me then. And what I have now is right for me now. My kids are 9 and 10. They're in 4th and 5th grade. And I absolutely adore the time I get to spend with them. And I would not trade that. As much as I love my students, as much as I love to be successful professionally, if it's finishing a piece of music or my kids, it's going to be my kids every time.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, just given everything that we've all been through in the last couple of years, when you look at different Facebook groups or you talk to people and you kind of see what they're doing. And, I think the whole idea of work-life balance has become, very important, especially to music educators. And, I think we're seeing more of, people want to do their work and then they also want to make sure that that their life is happening outside of that. And, I think it all is just a very good thing. And I think we're going to see, just band in general and the people who are responsible for teaching it just kind of move that direction with making sure that we do have a very healthy work-life balance.
Yeah, and I want to kind of touch on that a little bit. My brother is a very successful lawyer. He retired young. But when he was a young lawyer, he was working like 60, 80-hour work weeks. That's the medical resident who's, gone all weekend in the ER. I think when you're a young band director, you're cutting your teeth and you're learning the gig, if you're not a young parent, if you don't have a family, it's okay to devote that kind of energy. It's okay to be the first car in and the last car out. But I think you have to evolve and you have to understand that you use those first couple years when you have this flexibility to build up your experience so you don't need to do that anymore. As a teacher, I don't feel the need to prepare endlessly because I've taught for 27 years. There's nothing in the classroom other than a 4th grader that scares me.
So what are some of the challenges you feel that we're facing in music education and band?
Well, it's really interesting. My thinking on this has evolved just like all these questions and my own answers because I've heard so many people. And those who have been kind of following me on Facebook or know me personally or maybe saw my announcement is on the page is that I kind of quietly and under the radar got a master's in music education at the University of Florida, kind of in their online program, which was terrific, by the way. And my final capstone project was a study of this podcast question, the question I've asked all these people. And I kind of coded them out and to try to figure out what people were saying. And so what I did is I took the top 20 most downloaded episodes, or 25, until I had enough to feel like I had a good sample. And I kind of analyzed and coded them out. And so, they generally broke down into 5 categories, the answers to this question. Teacher challenges, such as like expectations and workload and negative social attitudes. Student challenges, like stress on students and distractions from technology. Funding and inequity. So we have obviously inequity, and that's pretty easy. A lot of people mention funding, but we know that. And then technology, both positive and negative, maybe an over-reliance on technology, maybe social media causes some of these negative societal attitudes. But the biggest one by far is relevance. And that comes up over and over again. And this ties into my conversation earlier about trying to reach more students. It's subtle, but when you look at the research, participation has been declining over the last 50 years. And this was mentioned at the, now I'm drawing a blank. What was it? The Tanglewood Symposium in 1968 talked about this, and it's only kind of gotten worse. We're slowly bleeding students. Now, it's not a lot. It's not like we're down 20% since 1968, but it's like a 0.5% every couple years. And so we're kind of losing students slowly but surely. And so we're constantly having to legitimize what we do. To try to keep our participation up. And I really feel like, trying to reach more students and is the answer, not to change what we do as band directors, but to try to show music to the whole student body in a more positive light. And I think this will bring kids to us. It'll get them to cross the street to us, I guess. And so that to me is the biggest challenge, is how do we stay relevant? And again, I'm reflecting my guests and what I've thought about over the years, but I think it's really relevance and trying to stay in these kids' lives and make sure that what we do is important to our students, our community, and our stakeholders.
So this might be a little controversial, and I know that, your average everyday person comes in contact with music at least once a day. And so do you have any thoughts on this? Is the traditional model of music education holding us back from this?
No, I don't, but I think we have to be very careful that we don't lose it. I don't think it's holding us back, but I think that if we're not careful, we're going to lose it, if that makes sense. Now, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. It's not doomsday kind of thing, but I think we need to work really hard to kind of show our legitimacy and to kind of, Patrick Dunnigan talked about this. I play in a community band. We just had our Christmas concert last night, and it was a hoot, there's players that are 80 years old, and then there was a player who was like 12, in the community band. And, here I am, a music professional playing in there. There's other music teachers, but there's also people who are farmers and, they're teachers and they're whatever profession you could imagine, bus drivers in this community band. But so we're talking about 50 years worth of high school graduates from this town, right? And yet the band only has about 50 members. Well, there have been thousands of people that came through the band program there. So what's happening in our band programs that when they finish high school, that they no longer feel like that is a type of music that they want to make or be involved with? And I'm not saying that to say we're doing something wrong, but I think there is part of the essence of the question. Why are our programs seen only as an educational program, right? Why is the only kind of concert that adults want to go see like the orchestra, the symphony? Is it a status issue? Is it like there's something about going to see the symphony that makes people feel, posh and wealthy? And the band is kind of like, that's a high school thing. I think there's a lot to that question, but I don't think it's that we have to change anything or we have to, it's a really difficult question you're asking because I don't know the answer to it, but I do think, we have to keep fighting for its legitimacy, and we have to try to keep fighting to keep students continuing to play. I play in a community band, so I can tell my students to go play in the community band. My next door neighbor played the trumpet in high school. Her daughter's playing the flute. She's in my son's band. He's starting percussion, but she played trumpet in high school. And I said, well, come and play with us. Come and play with the community band. Nah, I can't play anymore. It's been too long. And, we're missing something. There's like something's not connecting.
Okay, so if you had a time machine and you could go all the way back, what is some advice that you would give yourself?
My favorite question. So I've got lots of answers because I've heard lots of answers. One, switch instruments. Go to college, be a music major, but play euphonium or learn trombone, but be a low brass player because I think you're better set up for it. That's the first bit of advice I'd give. I wouldn't have listened because I was a trumpet player in 18. The second bit of advice, of course, would be to practice more in college, especially piano. One of my favorite anecdotes is when I got to graduate school, I had to teach oral skills, and I only had like class piano skills. So here I am in oral skills, and I'm kind of fumbling through piano, and I got observed by the supervising teacher who told me that if I didn't improve on piano, they were going to yank my graduate assistantship. And so I suddenly got far more motivated to learn piano at that point in my career. And I wish I had taken class piano more seriously. And of course, everyone's laughing because I don't think there's a music major alive that doesn't think that. But I guess the overriding advice would be to believe in myself. One of the things that has marked my career is that I've dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of self-doubt. Here I am. I don't know what I'm doing. Even this education master's degree is a reflection of that. I don't feel like I'm part of the club, so I have to go get a piece of paper that says I am. Well, I've come to learn basically through that degree, plus seeking out some help, mental health help, is that this isn't true at all, that I'm fine. And whatever I do is fine. I don't have to, write a piece of music that's going to get played at Midwest and bought by 1,000 bands across the country. I don't need to be John Mackey or Randall. That's okay. I'm me. I'm who I am. And it's taken a long time to come to that. And I got to say, I would also tell myself to get mental health help a lot earlier. I was recently diagnosed with ADD, and it explains a lot about my personality and the things that I've gone through. And honestly, since I've been seeing and getting help and on medicine, to be quite honest, and I am much more positive about that aspect of my career. And so I that's what I would say is, don't be afraid to seek help. Now, it's a different time than it was when I was young, right? This was the 80s, the early 90s, and, I was young, so I don't know. But that's what I would say.
So if you had the option, what would be the final work that you would like to conduct or hear in person, and why?
Well, I have two answers for this. I people have heard this before, but I ask the question this way because I don't want people to give me their favorite work. I want people to give me a work that means something to them. And I think one of my two great peak experiences, one of them was with Irish Tune from County Derry, being a high school senior, playing that high C at the end. The band sounded terrific. We had a good high school band. And I can remember that afternoon of that rehearsal and the sun coming into the window, the smell of it, the whole thing. And that was the day I think I wanted to become a musician forever because it was such a peak experience. But in college, my college band director passed away, and he joked with us in one rehearsal before anyone knew he was sick that he wanted his last concert. He wanted to play Crown Imperial by William Walton, finish the piece, take the applause, and then expire in the wings. And so when he passed away at his memorial concert, we played Crown Imperial. And I just remember it was very difficult to get through. And every time I hear that piece, I cry. Not because I was particularly close to him, but because it meant so much in the moment. And it kind of makes me understand the power of music and my love of music and why I do what I do. So if I'm ever feeling like I want to quit, I put on Crown Imperial because it kind of dredges up all those emotions and kind of teaches me or reminds me of what it is why I want to do. Now, there's a whole bunch of pieces beyond that. There's pieces that I've written, pieces that my wife has played, so many pieces that mean things to me. But I would say just Crown Imperial probably.
Now, there's some great choices and thoughts with that. Do you have anything coming up that you want to share or promote personally? I mean, I know we're all going to be at Midwest, and we have a lot of news with the podcast coming out soon, but is there anything for yourself or your compositions or your teachings and situations? Is there anything that you want to personally promote or share with the listeners?
Well, I think, I don't have any huge plans. I am part of a consortium at the Colorado State University Pueblo. This is a piece I'm finishing up now. My nephew passed away just short of his 22nd birthday in February of 2020 from an opioid overdose. He was an addict since he was a young teen, 16, 17, and he really struggled in high school, ended up getting a GED and was really putting his life back together, had just finished rehab and had been clean for a while, and he had a relapse, and it killed him, this relapse. And my brother found him in his bed in the morning, and it was terrible for our family. And so when I was at the memorial service in Pueblo, I decided I was going to write a piece of music for my nephew, and it's become, it's really hard to write, to be honest. And I reached out to the band directors group asking if anyone knew anyone in Pueblo, and everyone directed me to Alan Mills, who's the director of bands there, and he's also a Florida State graduate, so we immediately connected. We had coffee the night of the service, and I said, Alan, if I write this piece for my brother and his family and my sister-in-law, would you play it? And I said, I don't want any money. I don't want anything from it. I just want someone to play it for them. And he was like, sure. And then he said, well, we do this consortium every year, and I've got Steve Danu coming in, but let's add you to it. And I was like, wow, that's really kind of him. And so he put this consortium together and added me. It's me and Steve, and we're both separate and together, if you know what I mean, as far as what you can donate or what you want to get in for. But it was canceled the first year, which was good because I wasn't quite ready to write it. And it's coming up in February if you still want to get in the consortium. It's going to be probably grade 3-ish, 4-ish. I'm trying not to make it too hard so that it's accessible to a lot of bands, but I'm excited about what it's going to be, and I think it's going to be a good piece. At least, it's hard as a composer to say that because you just don't know.
And then one last thing, Mark, I feel like most of our listeners know how to get in touch with you, but could you just kind of run through, if people do want to reach out, especially after this episode, where maybe they might have some similar situations happening, can you just kind of give us a rundown of how our listeners can get in touch with you?
Yeah, and I'll reiterate it again. This has been a really difficult couple years for me. And again, I don't know if it's egotistical or if I'm not being humble, but I feel like I've had a pretty amazing career. I mean, I look back and I'm proud of my accomplishments, and I really have very few things to look back and feel like a failure, but yet this year has really tested me. These past 2 years have really tested me, and I think it's tested a lot of people. And I think if you're feeling, these feelings, if you ever need a pick-me-up or you want to just talk to someone, just reach out to me or reach out to a mentor. It's been a tough time for band directors. And, frankly, it's been a tough time for teachers in general. We're kind of under attack a little bit here. And it just feels like the world's kind of against us a little bit. So if you want to talk to me, that's fine. And you can reach me at, the podcast. It's mark@everythingbandpodcast.com. You can certainly find me on Facebook. And, I'm there and as my composer account, my personal account, and the Everything Band account. So I certainly have a presence there. So feel free to reach out and stop by the Barnhouse. Well, Barnhouse isn't going to be there. Stop by the RWS Music booth at Midwest. I am going to be there for a couple of hours a day. I'm happy to talk to you.
Oh, well, Mark, it's been really fun being on this side of it. And, I have, had the privilege of hearing your story and background. And so I think it's really neat that we're going to share it in this platform. And, it's a little scary being on the interviewer end of this, but it has been really fun.
Well, I'm hoping, Colin, maybe we can do a few more episodes with you're the host. We'll have to ask the listeners what they think. Shall we keep Colin on? Be kind, everyone. No, we're in a kind profession. I think in general, there's some characters who maybe aren't so kind, and we all know them. But I think we would say by and large that we're a good community of people, and the band world's really tight knit, and we watch out for each other. So,
Mark, do you have any closing thoughts for us, I guess, as we wrap this up?
No, Colin, thanks for doing this. I was hesitant, and I'm still a little hesitant about this episode, just because this podcast has never really been about me, even though, I certainly do enjoy what it is, and I like to participate in the conversations I have with people. But, thanks for doing this, and thanks for asking thoughtful questions, and just the opportunity to be on the other side and to feel like I can get my sort of thoughts out after so many episodes.
Thank you again for the opportunity. I've had a blast with it.
Absolutely, Colin, and thank you for all of your help.